Okay, again, welcome. I've been tramping around this field now for probably 10 years. And I ran across Mike at a retirement or some John Deere function, and I was doing airplane pictures at that time, and so I started tracking his farms, all of his farms. Major operator, so quite an adventure. But I got on this place, and it's just amazing because it's so light. It's way too dry up there. In the middle, it's pretty good, and down there, it's way too wet. Alicia and Mike, this is a 4-mic meeting, so we got to be really careful about our mics here. But they'll talk a little bit more about that, and it's been fascinating to see where the good crop is moves a little bit dependent on weather, whether we get rain or whether we don't. So. And in my looking at, it's kind of like, boy, what can we do? What could be done? So I've done a number of things with a number of different people, but then of recent got involved in the wider row corn, and then that got me into the cover crop thing. And then the cover crops is like, okay, why do you do cover crops? And then you go into the various websites, and there's some really good ones, and you got to make some decisions. Why would you have a cover crop? Well, are you trying to improve the soil? You're trying to reduce erosion? The list goes on. Do you want to graze it? Secondary crop and all that. So I've kind of gone down the rabbit hole of cover crops. We did this field day last year. We had incredibly good cover crops. We'll talk about some of the equipment associated with it and all of that. This year, we're kind of circling the wagon back and saying, let's talk about corn. And Mike and I have an interesting relationship. We both have engineering degrees. About 1.5 miles from here, there's a factory. And they make two things out there. A lot of you guys are from there, right? They make big tractors. What else do they make? Money, lots of money. And so Mike spent most of his career orbiting in that production environment, either manufacturing management, supply management, and all that. Mike is my factory manager. He just wants to efficiently make money. Bob, if you can't help me make money, there's the drive. See ya. Have fun. But I come from another factory that's about 7.5 miles in that direction. And what do they make at that factory? Not much of anything. In a good year, they might make a handful of tractors, but they make ideas. And most of the factory managers don't want a lot to do with the gang in the engineering world until they're in trouble. Then they have a lot of time for them. But there's a rule in the engineering world that we would spend 10% of the engineering dollars on advanced. And that's where I ended my career. Mike ended his career managing a part of the factory. That's the way he runs his operation. It took me a few years to get used to the idea that most farmers are like factory managers, and they don't have a lot of time for experimenting. They don't want to take time to do stuff. They just want to get things done efficiently and make money. So here I come with my little advanced ideas, and I'm going to show you some of what I do. And if you're here or watching this and you just want to go out and farm and just make money and manage your inputs, that's great. Go ahead and do it. But what we're going to do today is share with you a concept called the opportunity space, which is what is between the corn rows. So that's really Myra. Where's Myra? Something here. There you are. Mira. I'm sorry. She told me she's interested in gardening, the home gardening from a you and I perspective. You should have the best day here of anyone. You may wonder what you're doing sitting in the middle of this cornfield, but you should have a really good day. So, so the plan here is I want to talk just a little bit more about the opportunity space, and then we're going to take a walk, and I'll show you what we're doing. I do want to acknowledge the USDA. I complain as much as anybody, maybe more than most, about the government and all of that. But after a number of years, I figured out, I finally found a customer that cared about what I was doing, that had a checkbook, was willing to write some checks, and would support me in what I'm doing. So Some friends suggested that knew what I was doing, suggested I ought to apply for some grants. So I've been running on a couple of small grants the last couple of years, and this is a part of that. And there is no free lunch out there, so every time there's money, there's a string. So there's some things I'm doing, some of which I grumble about, others of which when it's all done, I'm glad I did. One of the things you'll see here, in this little 2-acre parcel, there are 4 replications. That's because experimentally you gotta have replications. The statisticians go nuts if you don't. And then everybody that's around agriculture knows that weather trumps everything else, what kind of year it is. So you can't compare data from one year to the next. And I can go do something special, but if I don't have a baseline, this is my engineering coming back in, if I don't have a baseline to compare it with, what I do over here compared to what a different guy came in and planted corn for Mike over here, there's no comparison. So for me, each of the replications has to have a baseline. So the baseline that you're going to see here is 30-inch corn planted in more or less the traditional way with the traditional population and all of that. And then we're going to show you some 60-inch corn, and we're going to show you some 90-inch corn. Now, my good friend Reno, sitting here a few years ago, about 2016, I think it was, said, Bob, you're all about this sunlight thing, and you think you're so smart. Why don't we plant corn in wide rows? So I said, well, I don't think that's probably a very good idea, but what the heck, we'll do it. It's advanced. So we did. And surprisingly, so I planted some 60-inch corn because that's what my equipment liked, and it turned out kind of interesting. And then a funny thing happened. I was telling the story, and there were some people in the audience that perked up when they started seeing images of like one of my good friends standing in cover crop this deep in September, because most folks that are trying to do cover crops struggle to get a good establishment in the fall, or about now, you know, the applications are starting, and so we're betting on the weather, the frost, and all that. So I didn't understand why they were so excited, but then I figured out after the meeting they were grazing. They had livestock. They'd go out, and the traditional practice is graze the corn residue and let them out there for a couple of months. And these guys started figuring out they could probably graze them all winter, and there are people doing that. So for me, the real joy is seeing others take an idea and play with it. My good friend Lauren Steinlage up in West Union has a simple little statement. He says, don't adopt what I do, adapt from what you see here. So if you think about what's going on here, I would not wish this really on anybody, not even myself most days, but take something and figure out what from it you might play with. And then for me, the fun part is when people take that and start to experiment with it and make it better. So one of the evolutions has been 60-inch rows. There are people that are playing with this. They've evolved to, the ones that are most successful there's a number of components to it, and it's not simple. The batteries in my easy button went dead long ago, but we just keep trying. So, but the ones that have become most successful like twin rows. So you'll have 2 rows about 6-8 inches apart, and then a 45, 50-inch opening, and then another pair of twins. I didn't do that here. I've done a little bit of that, and it's interesting. But then because others are doing this, now it's time for me to move on. What's next? You know, what's the next thing? So that's where the 90-inch come in, and most people go, wait a minute, you gotta be crazy. So what I'd like to do now is take a walk, and I'll show you my yield results. And disclaimer number 1, if you think corn should be 250 bushels to the acre or you should stay home, you're going to be disappointed. Remember that last year we got, according to Climate Corp, the best I can tell, about half as much rain as we did this year. It seemed like it was less, and it was not very timely. Mike has hammered me many times. The rain has to come at the right time for everything to work. And we did a little better job of feeding the crop this year, but last year we got nothing. So whatever we got this year is a bonus. I will tell you, up there a couple of 100 feet, the corn is down to about nothing because it's too dry. Down that way a couple of 100 feet, the corn is down to about nothing because it's too wet. I was pretty proud of myself. I got big fat tires on my tractor. I planted into this wet ground, and then Mike had a nutrient applicator company come in and put nutrients down with a big high clearance machine. The first thing they did is went out there and got stuck because the big equipment didn't like the environment very well. So, but